Welcome everyone that's just joined. I can see a few people are still joining us. So welcome to today's Off the Page event. And I am going to let Jackie and Minta introduce themselves. So Jackie, could you go first?
Of course. So I'm Jackie Fast. I am an entrepreneur, I guess an author, now a venture capitalist. I own a venture fund in LA that invests in talent-led collaborations. So things like Beats by Drake, Kylie Cosmetics, Fabletics, Good American. And my background is I set up my first business called Slingshot Sponsorship in my bedroom of a rented flat in London. And originally I was just trying to keep my visa, but the agency blew up. My clients include Richard Branson, Rolling Stones, every kind of massive brand, any major kind of artist. We had offices globally. And through there, I've worked with some of the biggest leaders. I know the founders of Twitter and Facebook, et cetera. And what I found along the way really is that, those that were willing to take risks, those that were willing to be bold, those that like really believed in what they were doing, really kind of overcame the odds, myself included. I ended up selling my business just 6 years on to a conglomerate in Singapore, made a load of money, took that money, invested in a bunch of stuff. And in my wildest dreams, I would never have ever been able to foresee that. And I really do think it comes down to mindset, and particularly, how you lead as a person. And so I recently wrote a book called Rule Breaker: Rebellious Leadership for the Future of Work that really kind of looks at this, highlights this, and kind of shows you how to be a bit more brave, whether you're working for yourself or whether you're working for somebody else. I don't think it actually matters. I very much believe that, anything is possible with the right mindset. And so that's kind of what the book is about. And I'm really delighted to be here for Kogan Page to talk about everything leadership. And so, any question, I'm like all for it. So ask away. That's kind of why we're here.
Perfect, thank you. And Minta, could you please introduce yourself too?
So it's a pleasure to be here with you, Janie and Jackie. So my name is Minta Dahl. I'm a 57-year-old Franco-American living in London. And I have the bulk of my career was at L'Oreal, the cosmetics company, where I ran a company called Redken, where I was able to practice what I preach. I like to believe that I'm someone who walks the talk and now talks the walk. My whole gambit has been about trying to lead with purpose and put purpose at the heart of our daily lives as well as at work. And by doing so, you end up with a more congruent, authentic you. And that's been my general purpose over the last 15 years. I'm also a filmmaker. I did a World War II documentary that's been on PBS in the United States and History Hit in Britain, History Channel in Australia and New Zealand to try to cover the world. And of course, it's on YouTube and all the rest. And that led me to understand what are core key values in life when you talk to 130 veterans of the Second World War. And that's grounded me and led me to be the person that I am today.
Perfect, thank you. So before we get started with our conversation, we wanted to ask our audience whether you think that your company, brand, or organization have a well-defined purpose. So I'm going to share a poll in a second, so please do vote, and we're really looking forward to seeing your thoughts. And then we're going to do the same poll at the end to see, hopefully you would have come away with something and your answer might have changed. So I am going to share it now. You should all be able to see it. Please do vote. I'll leave it up for a little bit longer, let everyone have a think. Brilliant. I think that seems to be everyone. So I'm going to end it now, and then we're going to share the results. So it seems like most people think they have a somewhat well-defined purpose. So it will be interesting to see how the conversation goes from here. I'm going to start off with our first question then, just to ground the conversation today a little bit more. And the first question is, what is a purpose and how can you harness yours authentically? So Jackie, could you please start?
Sure. So I think I think a purpose is going to be different for everybody, but personally, I think it really needs to start with what you're passionate about. And you know, everybody has like a love and something that's innate within them. And I think often one of the things that's kind of missing, you know, when we grow up and when we're in school, we're always told or always asked, like, what do you want to be? You know, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you're older? And it's a question that's kind of like when you're like 2, people are like asking, and it's always cute. I recently moved and went through my garage and found out that I wanted to work at an ice cream shop. That was what I wanted to do. But the thing is, nobody ever asks kids, like, what do you care about? You know, like, what do you care about? What are the things that you like what's important to you? And I think because of that, there's a big disconnect between where we end up and where we, I guess, really should, like, where we should end up, because, you know, we're really focused on the action rather than the purpose internally. So for me, purpose is always defined by, you know, what is it that you're passionate about, and really kind of creating a work environment or a work situation which really drives that. And when those two things are aligned, you know, it kind of doesn't become work. And that for me is what purpose is.
Brilliant. And Minter, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, sure. So like Jackie says, a lot of times we get this question, I suppose, past being children when we're at work, or like, what's the purpose of your organization? Just like the poll. And for a lot of people, I think this is a confusing idea. For those who think they have it, here's my warning. I think most people only have a broad and ill-defined notion of purpose. My definition of purpose is to answer the following question: how would the world be worse off if you didn't exist? So the notion behind this is that you're trying to do something more than just have profits for you and your piggy bank. The second thing I do is I try to help, because, you know, I ran a big business, and it can be quite daunting to try to have purpose every time, all day long, with everybody in the organization, your distributors, your clients, and everybody. So what I do is I break down purpose into 5 categories of meaningfulness. And so the idea behind purpose is to drive the energy and the strength and conviction of what you're doing. And if you can have meaningfulness in your day, that's a way to have purpose. So there are 5 levels, as I say. So to go from a very light touch, which can include having play, enjoyment, laughter, reward, to bigger ideas like working with a team, having that wonderful sense of accomplishment with a team, to going towards doing something for the planet, and then this higher version of purpose, which is doing something to make the world a better place. So that's how I define purpose, along a nuance, because not everybody can be Mother Teresa-like in their spirit and their ambition. At least have meaningfulness at the small and hopefully up to the big level.
That's a really interesting way of thinking about it and getting people to think about it. I'd be intrigued to know if our audience have any thoughts on what their purpose is. So please do put it in the chat. I think it would be great to see how maybe you would tackle some of those questions from Inter. They're really thought-provoking. And that leads on to our next one quite nicely. So the next question is, how can you reflect your personal purpose and values through your brand? So Minter, if you could continue on this topic.
Yeah, so the key point here is self-awareness and the idea of understanding what is your personal purpose. And the challenge we have is that oftentimes at work, we think that work is work, and that needs to stay in the box of the professional space. And what happens at home is nothing to do with work. And I tend to push back and I say, well, we only have a short life, one life to live. And if you're going to work 40, 60, 80 hours a week, why not make it part of you? So the game plan actually is to work on what is your personal purpose first. And the vast majority of people have an idea of their North Star. I know I don't want to be. But when you push them, what I have found is that the vast majority only have a vague idea. I haven't had time to actually write it down. It's not, it's in my head, but I kind of have an idea. I want to be healthy, wealthy, rich, happy, have a good family, all these wonderful things. But that isn't a sufficient purpose. You need to have something that individually suits you and makes you stand out, be the best version of you. And then once you've understood who you are, then you need to tackle and see whether your company or brand, whatever organization you're working with, has a professional purpose that is de facto felt, not something written on some wall in a beautiful annual report. This is who we are. Something that feels real and that you can relate to. And the challenge for individuals is to see whether their personal purpose, let's say characterized within this V, overlaps with the purpose of your organization. You can never have, it's very rare you have a complete overlap, but at least find the overlap. And that requires, first of all, knowing your own personal purpose at a deep and specific level. That's how I answer that. Jackie, your turn.
Yeah, so I agree. Sorry, bad timing with the plane. I think it's very important to understand what it is that you stand for, 100%, and what you care about. And I mean, Minter kind of did mention the whole Mother Teresa thing. I think for me, it's worthwhile to mention, like, if you really just care about money, that's okay. If that's the thing that's driving you, then that, like, you don't. Not everybody has to be like for the planet. Of course, that would be great. But I think a lot of people get whitewashed with what they think that they should be, and what they think that they should feel, and what they think that they should do, and what they truly care about. And I think that's a hard thing. The other thing that I probably would add is, I think some of this stuff doesn't affect the younger generations as much as it probably affects Minter's and my generation. You are seeing younger people actively push back within their businesses. Amazon walkouts is a really great example. They forcefully have made Jeff Bezos donate $1 billion to sustainability. And so I think a lot of this stuff, it's naturally happening. People are, especially with the way that you're working, I think, as Minter said, the separation isn't there so much. Online businesses mean that you are always on. And so the importance of aligning what you care about to the work that you do is prevalent, just because it's a reality of our day-to-day life. We are no longer 9 to 5. We no longer leave the house, go into an office, and come home and have the physical separation, which allows you to kind of like park stuff. Your work is now effectively you. And so it's now almost impossible, but also important to kind of make sure that those things align. And I really, really reiterate what Minter said. I think it is important to think about this stuff, and to really kind of reflect what it is you really care about. And I mean, a lot of people say, I'm really for the environment, but if you look in their trash bin, probably don't even recycle. So it's stuff like that, like, be critical about yourself. Like, what is it that you care about? So for me personally, and I have known this as a young age, I love a challenge. I'm driven, wholly and solely driven on a challenge. That is the thing that gets me up in the morning. I have to have things hard, and if they're not hard, I mean, I don't do much. I'll just like sit around watching Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. But I know, but it's taken me a bit, but I know kind of where I excel, and it's, I have to be pushed, and I have to put myself in places that I feel uncomfortable, because that's my purpose. That's kind of what drives me as a person. And so I think, it doesn't have to be like, I'm here to save the world. I'm here to, like, do sustainability. I want to make everybody happy. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be an outwardly meaningful thing that's going to save the world. For me, mine's inward. I like to be challenged. I need to be put in awkward situations, and that is my purpose. So I think being critical is important, and looking inward is important.
Thank you both. And I can see that some people are sharing their thoughts about purpose in the chat. I'm hoping we haven't caused Louise to have an existential crisis. She's said that she's now questioning her entire purpose. But I think Minter said, it's work in progress. And there was also an interesting one from Candida that says that the purpose has always been to improve quality of life. So regardless of the function, which is quite nice, that's quite broad. And like you said, it doesn't always have to be very specifically sustainability or diversity or anything like that. It can be broader than that. And Jackie, you actually touched a little bit on generational differences, which leads me into our next question quite nicely, which is how can you work with more traditional leaders? And if you're being managed by them or working alongside them, how can you help them understand the benefits of leading with purpose? So Jackie, if you could start with that one.
I mean, you're not going to like my answer. But, I mean, I could like sugarcoat it and be like, you know, softly, explain the benefits. The truth is a lot of traditional leaders are very stuck in their ways, and they, you know, they've grown up differently. They've been in different environments, and they've also, you know, flexed their skill set over a different type of working environment. So it is a lot to ask somebody in a senior management position who takes a very traditional carrot and stick approach to wholly change not just their management style, but like it's everything. It's their communication, it's their thought process, it's their mindset. And so my answer is I don't think you can. Now that's the non-sugarcoating way. The sugarcoating way is, I think leaders all want to be good leaders. I don't think there is a leader who doesn't want to be a good leader. And so kind of talking and taking small steps on how to lead better, more holistically, with more engagement and more collaboratively, I think can happen if you don't completely rewrite the rule book and also don't expect a complete 180 reversal. And so, yeah, my argument would be, you know, small steps, basically. You know, talk about like what I've always noticed, especially from top-down leadership styles, is, you know, it's very one-way communication. So they'll come in, they'll tell you what to do, they'll tell you their vision, they tell you your purpose, and you go on your way to your laptop and do your work. Collaboration is like a really great opportunity to kind of like start something. So whether that means, you know, open source Mondays. I mean, Google does it, where you can go and you can ask any question of any manager in a thing. And honestly, between me and you and some other people, obviously, they hate that now. Originally, they started doing it because they wanted to hear from employees, and now truthfully, they hate hearing from employees. And so it's just very hard to do. The truth of the matter is it's very hard to do, and I think a lot of people talk about it but don't actually put it in practice. Minter, I mean, coming from, you know, a big corporation, you probably have some thoughts on this.
I certainly do. And so I'm going to tell you a little story so I was working for L'Oréal. Roughly 100,000 people work in this organization, and all I was doing was running one of their companies. And of course, I had a boss, and I had about 2,000 people under me around the world in 40 countries. And so the way I looked at this was, how can I effect change in my organization? I can either try to organize up or lead down. And what I thought was useful was to run with the purpose that Redken had, which didn't necessarily jive with the purpose, or if L'Oréal should say that they have a purpose, that they had and that the leader, my boss, particularly believed in. And so by leaning into the purpose that my company Redken had, we ended up performing better. So the purpose of our company was interesting, which is earn a better living, live a better life. And what's interesting about that purpose is that it didn't fit within a L'Oréal construct. And secondly, it allowed for profitability to be a relevant purpose. And as I like to say, it's one of the 5 meaningful elements is actually to be part of a winning team. Because if you have no profit, you serve no purpose. You go out of business, and that doesn't solve anybody's help. So our purpose was earn a better living, live a better life. And so it recognizes the need to be profitable. But the second line, living a better life, is what we really focused on. And the concept that I like to strive for within purpose is not just within me, because that's just my, you know, I have to incarnate the purpose as the CEO of the company. but I wanted it to be lived inside out. So while we typically think of purposes to be customer facing, make the world a better place, be the most customer centric company on this earth, Amazon. What we did is we said, well, living a better life needs to be lived by our customers, the hairdressers who are buying our shampoos and color products and so on, by the distributors who are selling into the hairdressers. How can they live a better life, earn a better living? And also by our employees and our independent contractors who worked with us. So how can we have our employees within the larger confines of L'Oreal also feel that they can earn a better living and live a better life? And for those of you who are living in big organizations where you have HR policies and different types of governance, this becomes tricky to change compensation models, right? Marketing level this, managers get that paid, directors, and so on. So we couldn't touch the pay. But what we did is we translated the idea of earning a better living into time. And we allowed our teams to take time off in lieu of compensation, the normal way of, let's say, earning a better living. And that way we also contributed to living a better life. So we allow people to take time off to do their personal projects, personal passions. And we develop things like personal confidence. Anyway, the point I'm trying to get to is if you can demonstrate that leading with purpose also leads to performance, well, there is nothing stronger as a way to lead up and say, hey, this is the way to go. And the second way, which I found constructive, is to talk about legacy. And so it's maybe a little existential. I don't remember, it was Louise, I was talking about this existentialness. Well, at the end of the day, if you have earned lots of accolades, money, big houses, cars, stock options, you can't actually take those to your grave. The more interesting thing is, what is your reputation and what do you leave behind? What is your legacy as an individual? And if you can tap into that, sometimes we obviously need to get into the confidence of your boss to be able to have that type of a deep conversation. And that takes time. So you're never going to do that right away. Like Jackie says, you're probably going to be up against certain barriers to talk about existential elements. But in any event, what I did is I tried to model the behavior. I created my own idea of what my legacy was going to be. I implemented that in every type of job that I've had going forward. And it helps breathe down energy into the team. And hopefully that can model upwards towards the bosses who are less or more intransigent, less interested or open to having purpose.
Thank you so much. That's really interesting about the legacy, because I know you do a lot of work on personal branding as well. And actually the two could probably link quite nicely together there for leaders and the way of thinking. Before I move on to my final question, I wanted to pick up a question from Jenny in the chat, who's asking, what do you think about the ESG, so environmental social governance metric for rating an organization, so in regards to purpose and purpose driven? Jackie or Minter, whichever one of you has an opinion on that.
Minter can go ahead. I mean, we use them. So I work with a number of big brands, but also small brands, and it's not really always relatable to organizations, and it depends on what you kind of look at it. I think it's important. I think it's like a standard, any kind of standard, any kind of movement, I think is a good thing. But
so my angle, I talked about the 5 levels of meaningfulness. I make it easy. I start with P's. It's play, people, profit, make money, planet, and purpose. And planet, of course, is fine. I think the issue, though, just I think like Jackie was sort of hinting at, we can have whitewashing, greenwashing, and try to let's say pay lip service to these types of purposes. And the real issue is we all think we have a purpose, but actually it's making it come alive. And sort of like giving money to charity. Lovely. Let's give money to breast cancer charity or to save starvation in certain countries charity. Why not? But it's really can't be at it has to be congruent with who you are. And ideally it should be embedded within the organization. So it's part of who you are, not just some tag along where you identify a director of ESG or a director of something or other. It's much more powerful when everybody within the organization feels that they are contributing to your purpose. So ESG is a nice thing to have. It's part of, let's say, that idea of planet, doing things for the earth, to make your community, the world, a better place. But it can be too often a lure, a replacement of what is real purpose.
Thank you, and I hope that helps, Jenny. We're going to continue picking up questions from the chat, so do put them in. I've got another comment from Richard, which I wanted to touch upon as well before we move on to my final question, which is specifically for Jackie and your core motivation of meeting a challenge. And he was slightly surprised not to hear the development of others, as mentioned previously. He said, in his opinion, leadership is more about serving the interest of others.
So I'm super happy. Good question, Richard. And this is something I really like to talk about a lot, actually. There is a difference between being a manager and being a leader. So managing is helping get the best out of the people that work for you. Serving the interests of them. Minter kind of talked about it when he was at Redken, like, helping other people get the time so that they can work on their passion projects. And, that's important. And of course, keeping your staff happy is important. And that is what a manager should do. A leader is not that. A leader is somebody who is inspiring and inspires others towards a goal. And ideally, that should be a good thing, but you would also say that Adolf Hitler is a leader. Not a good one, but like he inspired a bunch of people to do a lot of bad things. Leadership and management are not the same thing. So when I was mentioning the fact that my personal core motivation is I like a challenge, the importance or the point of that is to be a good leader, you have to kind of know what it is that challenges you, or what it is that you're driven and what drives you as a person. So let's go into my exact thing. My thing is I like a challenge. What that actually looks like in practice within my business, it is very hard. When you work for me, you are working a lot because that is how I am. That is how I am wired. That is how I work. It is really important that anybody who comes to work for us understands that because it wouldn't be like working for Minter, who has a totally different personal purpose, and his personal purpose then filters down throughout the organization. And so if I were to try to do what Minter is doing, it wouldn't align with my personal purpose, and which would then have a disconnect with what we're actually trying to do within my organization. And so serving the interests of others, if that is your personal purpose, of course, then that's a really great thing to be a leader, but leadership is not the same as managing. So I don't know if that answers the question, Richard, but the point of that is that a leader should really understand what it is that they care about, and they should lead from that, because that is authentic. That is what will inspire people. That is what helps people align to you. That is what creates a movement. Saying you want to do good things and hoping other people help you do good things is not the same thing. Does that answer the question? Sorry, Janie, does that answer the question?
Well, I think that distinction is quite important, that difference between manager and leader, and how your purpose then drives either one, really, your management or your leadership. So I think there's definitely something to be taken away there.
I'd probably also add, I'm a really shitty manager. I mean, everybody who works for me loves to work for me, but they will also say it's not my strength. I'm not, I mean, as you can probably tell from this thing, I'm not a softly person. That kind of hurts my management style. Saying that, I'm a very good leader. So the two things are not necessarily mutually exclusive.
Thank you. And actually that once again leads me into my final question, which is, what happens if your purpose creates unintended backlash? And are there any situations where you can be too much yourself? So Minter, could you please start with this one?
Well, if you aren't creating any backlash, I would argue that you're not in the the right business. The idea of trying to please everybody all the time with everything is a well, it's probably a slow road uh, into a wall, because we tend to I think we're risk averse as we get into business, and we get bigger, and then we have so many more stakeholders and it becomes complex. I think it's important to be able to stand up for what you believe, which means more than just writing it on a wall. It means demonstrating that. And so it becomes complicated when, let's say, your purpose could be at odds with popular movements, or you're not prepared to talk about something that is popular and trendy in a politically correct world. So reality is, I think if you want to create a strong business, you need to stand out. And to stand out, you have to stand up for what you believe. And that takes a certain amount of, knowledge of yourself. I was trying to find an alternative word for courage, but I was going to use another set of words. But basically, to have the courage to then define and act on what you believe in, and that's going to piss some people off. If you aren't pissing somebody off, I would argue you're not doing your job properly, because otherwise you're just trying to please everybody, appease everybody, and by doing that, by saying you're everything to everybody, you are nobody. And that's clearly not a good motivating line as far as being a leader is concerned. That's my feeling. So fact is, you will create backlashes. If you are congruent and you've been doing this and you've been talking about it for 25 years, it sounds right. And typically what's going to happen is that your employees will have been hired in the vein, in the mold, in the concepts that you've been talking about. And of course, you're going to have issues and bad eggs and so on. But if you've been doing it for a long time, it's going to be fine. If what you are saying comes out of the blue and creates a backlash with your employees, well, then you got a problem, Houston. Then you need to reel it in, understand why you went wrong, how you went wrong. Because ultimately, as I say, you need to lead inside out. And if your employees are not your number one fans, then either you have the wrong employees or you got the wrong purpose. Or at least wrong products and everything else as well. So when you have backlash, it's probably a good sign that you have people that you're pissing off, as long as what you are standing up for is good, has grounded in proper ethics, and is followed by your team.
Yeah, I agree with everything Mentor said.
Brilliant. I think, Jackie, I was going to ask if you could speak about this specifically, about being too much. I think that's a comment a lot of people, especially a lot of women, get.
For sure.
So yeah, if you could pick up on that.
So, and I mean, I guess this is quite relevant. So I am a lot as a person and also as a woman. And as Minter kind of said, like, if you are looking around and your employees are not your number one fan, there's something wrong there. You're either, not being yourself, hiring the wrong people, all of that stuff. So I have always really never dumbed myself down or, I guess, kind of sheltered or minced my words, because it's just not within my personality. I'm somebody who likes to get stuff done, and I don't have the time or the patience, quite frankly, to make other people feel comfortable. That honestly has really helped me. It has really quickly enabled other people to get on board or not. And I have achieved a lot in my very short time of being in business, and a lot of it is because I say what I think, I do what I mean, I'm very transparent, and then the people that I work with want to work with me because they know who I am, and they want to align, and so I end up the people that gravitate towards me are people that want to support me, that like what I'm doing, that like what I'm about. And that obviously has enabled me to go faster and further with help. And I think everybody needs help, especially now. So no, I don't think you can be too much yourself. Now, saying this, I was at another event and this question came up and somebody said like crying in the office. So that's the thing. Like, so I do still think it's still work. And there should be certain boundaries, like there are certain boundaries with all relationships that you have, whether it's your friends or your parents or whatever. And so I still think it is still a working environment. So you should still be as professional as you can, as you can be in as professional a situation as you possibly can. But effectively within that boundary, no, I don't think that you can be too much you.
Thank you both so much for that. And Louise has actually put a question in the chat that's quite interesting. I know, Minter, you sort of put a quick comment there, but I think it would be great for you to both discuss. And the question is, do all businesses need a purpose? Sometimes it doesn't seem to be very authentic, even though their intentions are good. So why is this? And just to build on that, I think there's been a lot in the media about this recently, given recent events and different sorts of issues going on. So I think a lot of brands have been maybe named and shamed, I suppose, for this. So it would be great to see your takes, and if you have any examples as well, would be really helpful. Minter, could you start with this one, please?
Yeah, sure. So I wanted to just talk a little bit more about the being yourself story. Because at the first point, the idea of being yourself, authentic you, is kind of a misnomer, because basically no one ever even knows themselves 100%. Anyone who pretends they do is probably not fully cognizant of looking at everything. I mean, in the end of the day, it's a work in progress. I certainly feel that about myself. And secondly, within yourself, you always have, I think, three parts, the way I see it. You've got a professional part, you have a personal part, and then you have this intimate part. And the challenge is how much of the personal and professional you want to bring into the workplace, and knowing that the intimate should be kept outside. So it's understanding all three of these components. And then the key point here is the governance model or the organization context in which you're working. Because as Jackie is saying, there are some companies where, you're lawyers and there's a profile of personality. Yet I've actually worked with a bunch of lawyers who at their meetings bring out kazoos and instruments and demonstrate their musical talents. And you might say, well, what does that have to do with being a good lawyer? Well, it turns out that having a culture at the organization is good for collaboration, and the lawyers work together. And it's not necessarily have to be like some of these consultancies where the partners are at each other's throats all the time. And as soon as you allow anything on the personal level, much less crying, then it's going to be used against you. And I wanted to, because you mentioned crying, and I wanted to bring up, I was brought up in boarding school, playing rugby, and you weren't generally encouraged to cry. Au contraire, it was basically, bad, poorly viewed. So one day I was presenting at a really big press launch. We had 60 people in the audience. The biggest editors and journalists were on hand, some famous people, celebrities and such. And I was super stressed. And even though I was in my position, I was really stressed. It can get to anybody. And as I just got on stage. It was a very intimate environment, very luxurious. I lost it. I started crying. I was so, invested in my idea, but I was also caught up in the stress of what was going on. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh, fruits, I'm so sorry. I can't believe I'm doing this. This is so unprofessional. I really apologize. And, this is L'Oreal. So this is not an organization that likes to do anything other than spit, shine, perfect. And anyway, someone clapped, a few other people clapped, and that allowed me to collect myself. So then I got back on my roadmap and I, did the lines and I did what I had to do. And at the end, I expected everyone to flood out. I was embarrassed, and again, I'm sorry what happened. And yet, the most important person in the room came up to me and hugged me. And what I realized was that by crying, they didn't think less of me. They actually felt more of me as in who I was as an individual. They understood me more. They felt that I was a real person. And so it taught me a really honorable lesson, which is that being vulnerable is quite useful, is just part of being authentic. Because if you have shit that happens, you might have had bad night's sleep, as I was telling you about before. So I slept badly. That's just real. And I still try to show up, but I know I didn't have a great night. And that's part of me. And it's okay not to be okay all the time. So anyway, that was just a kind of bounce back on what Jackie said, which didn't answer the prior question, which is, can all companies have purposes? And the answer to that is absolutely not. There are way too many companies that the concept is way out there. And just pragmatically speaking, all I want to do is earn enough money to pay the bills. And then at the end, I sell the company, basta così. However, if you are considering having a longevity to your organization, for example, you want to sell it on, or you want it to continue on, you're definitely going to want to think about your purpose and think about it in a meaningful way, where it's not some sort of pie in the sky hope, but you want to think it through. And the process of thinking about your purpose is absolutely illuminating. And it's that journey towards coming up with a purpose, providing you're not just dictating it as a leader, but you're bringing everybody on and forming it together. That journey is very solidifying and basically allows everybody to own it and feel like they're contributing to what the company's doing. But there are for sure many companies, many indolent individuals who don't have the concept, the desire to contribute to the world. All they want is to line their pockets. And lining your pockets is not a purpose. That is, it's necessary to be profitable, to continue your business. But the idea of a purpose is to serve some greater cause than your own little P&L. And the issue, oftentimes, when I talk about governance, are your shareholders. And are your shareholders bought in on your purpose, or do they only want the quarterly results?
So I'll just follow on from that. For me, I think the point of a purpose is to drive the results. And not because the truth of the matter is all the things that Minter said are true. When you have a purpose, you have people working towards your purpose, you are working towards a goal, you work harder, you work smarter, you work more collectively, and inevitably that drives profitability. So having a purpose is important for profitability. Having a purpose is, you could argue, is important for serving the world. I think the point of having a purpose, though, is that it works. Yes, it's a good thing. Yes, it's nice to work in a company that has a purpose that is aligned to your purpose, because that's just nicer generally. But the truth of it is businesses that lack purpose will not get as far. And so even if you are just interested in lining your pockets, selling it on and being done and kind of, retiring to a horse farm, the point of having a purpose is you'll get there faster. And it is important. And I think all businesses should know what they stand for. And I don't necessarily see purpose as necessarily a greater good. I think you can have a business that doesn't necessarily serve the greater good but has a purpose. So I think you should use the word purpose in its actual word. Does your business have a reason for being? Do you have a reason for being to get up in the morning and do the work that you do? And if you don't, and you're just kind of going through the motions, it's inevitably not going to be a success.
And just kind of going back to the second half of Louisa's question, there is, how do you do it authentically, and why are some people's or some brands' purpose not very authentic? If maybe Minter could.
Well, so my belief is that, well, if I ask people, what is your North Star? Yeah, I know what it is. And what is your purpose of your organization? Yeah, I know what it is. And you will jump to this conclusion, and we're very articulate, verbal, will express something. But I'm really very dubitative as to whether that's been really thought through, just like strategy for that matter. To what extent is it well expressed and shared throughout the organization, such that everybody knows what it is and feels how they're contributing to it? So maybe the first port of call is the self-awareness factor, and to lean deeply into just how true they are to themselves and to the purpose they have with the organization, the crossover. When I was running Redken, I of course didn't come up with the mission or the purpose. I inherited it. The company began in 1960, was purchased by L'Oreal in 1993, and I ran it for 4 years, from 1999 to 2003, including, by the way, 9/11. So first of all, it was about embracing it, understanding it, how it worked for me. So how was Minter going to live a better life when I'm working 80 hours a week because I'm this top dog, driving the business, 40 countries, traveling 200 days a year? Where is the living a better life component of that? So I had to be true and real to myself, because otherwise I'm exhibiting the wrong behavior as far as leading my team to burn out. And so when 9/11 happened, it happened outside of my window. I watched as the first ball of flames appeared, and then the second airplane fly down and land in the South Tower. And this was interesting on many levels. First of all, my company, Redken, was signed Fifth Avenue, New York City. And so that meant that every advertising campaign we had an iconic element of New York in its photograph. And all of a sudden, on the morning of the 13th, I had to call the retoucher. And I said to him, he was in just over the river in New York. And his name was John. And I said, John, I need you to do me a favor. We have 2 campaigns. I need you to get rid of the Twin Towers in the background, because they were very representative and iconic of New York at the time. In his town, there were 100 people missing on the morning of the 13th. So you can imagine that he knew many people who were missing. And he said, so what floor would you like me to rub it out till? And all that for selling shampoos. So I had to dig in on what am I living a better life by just rubbing out all this? And it really woke me up to the need to have a stronger, higher purpose than just putting in the numbers and solving my boss's need to satisfy shareholders. By galvanizing everybody in a bigger way for a bigger purpose, it was a much stronger advantage. And I'm proud to say Redken at that time was the 5th largest company in the industry in the world. That's 2001. In 2021, it is the 2nd largest company in the industry and growing 3 times faster than the number 1 company. So as you say, Jackie, if purpose can lead to profit, that is the best thing. But it has to be thought through, purpose first, not for profit. It's purpose first, and profit will come as a consequence.
Yeah. Completely agree.
Great. Did you want to add anything regarding authenticity or lack of authenticity?
Yeah, I mean, to Minter's point, and I mean, to the person that asked the question, there's a lot of people that are creating purposes because they think that they should, and because everybody's doing it, and because it does lead to profit. But just saying you're going to do something and not truly believing it, and not actively living it, and not having the people beneath you really displaying it or living it, is just coming up with a mission statement that nobody cares about. Like this is like it's basically just a rewash of the 80s where everybody's like, let's have a vision, let's have a mission, let's put it on the board, everybody's gonna love it. Like, words are just words. It's really actions that are going to make the difference. And if you have an authentic purpose and you truly are living it, and the people beneath you are living it and believe in it, that is where the power comes from, not just putting a bunch of words on a board.
Thank you. And kind of building on communication, Muna's put in a comment into the chat, which says, transparency and speaking your mind as a leader, also as a manager, can be crucial. I've struggled a lot with my managers due to that. They were good leaders or managers, and I've never really understood them, probably because they didn't share who they were or what they wanted honestly. So based on this, what is the best way to share your purpose with employees at all levels? And I think for bigger organizations, is there a risk that a leader's purpose can get lost within the hierarchy? Jackie, could you start with this one, please?
Sure. I mean, I think to like Minter's point, like his whole thing is like, you know, living a better life, right? So if Minter's going to be doing 80 hours a week, like how is he doing that? And he had to really think about how that purpose looked like for him and what he was personally going to do. And people see that, you know, all of the people, he had 2,000 people employees. Like, it's not like Minter is like in some ivory tower. Minter is engaging with the staff, the people, communications, the press releases, the events that he does. It is so important that you understand it, but then also believe it. And I mean, this goes back to the whole authentic self and really going, you know, back to when we originally first started talking, like you really have to know yourself. You have to really, if you really want to be a leader, if you really want to be a good leader, you really have to know what it is you care about. And because you have to kind of align what you feel to your business's purpose. I'm obviously, I have the luxury. I've only ever owned my own businesses. I've built all my businesses from the ground up, so I've got the luxury of making everything fit me. Minter's a really great example of inheriting a purpose of a business that has been longstanding, but he's been able to look at like what his personal purposes and aligning that with the company that he works for and basically living it. So I think really living it is kind of is I mean, that's the best way. I don't know if I've answered the question very well, to be honest. Minter could probably add some more.
So I wanted to I think first of all, transparency. It's an interesting term. It's very popular, not to say trendy. And I think there's always an agenda behind transparency. So I tend to avoid the tyranny of transparency. I think just like I mentioned, you have these three parts to yourself. There is beauty in mystery. And the idea of having radical exposure of everything you're thinking about all the time probably just means you're speaking about you all the time. And second of all, communication is so important, storytelling. And so the story that I wanted to tell you about is that in some form of transparency, I definitely wasn't always the authentic me. It took me a while to work out who I was and what my sense of purpose was, what was going to drive me. And it came in a realization as I was working hard corporate life back in those days, even wearing ties. And sometimes I would rush home and strip off my tie and my suit, and I'd don a tie dye, and I'd go and shake my bones to a concert with lots of psychedelics and people who enjoy a different type of music. And so I was converting, I was transforming myself from this individual, the corporate stiff, to this rather shellacky, hippie looking individual that wore tie dye. And I felt like there was this, I was doing two things. And I feel like it's sort of representative of many of our lives as we play the role that we think we have to lead. And then we have this other internal me that's there, and I want to be different. I want to be me. And the question is, how can you try to consolidate them and be you? And so I went through that purpose, that moment where I realized that, whoa, selling shampoos is not the end all. Making success, having a big title is not the end all. How am I going to do something bigger? And so that's where I managed to, I'd say, overlay the tie and the tie dye and try to become the more me. And I'm certainly not perfect about it. So the point I'm trying to get to is that within authenticity, get to know yourself, know that you're never going to know yourself perfectly, and know that it's a journey. And by the way, we still evolve. Shit happens, experiences happen that can send you off course, like life-threatening near-death experiences. And you sometimes need to rejig.
Thank you. We've got 2 minutes left before we close the digital event for today. So thank you both so much. Sorry to those whose questions we didn't get to, but I quickly wanted to relaunch the poll just to see how people now feel about their company, brand, and organization's purpose. So it should be on your screens. Oh, in a second it will be. It should be on your screens. So please do vote. It would be really interesting to see. I think last time we had 50% said somewhat well defined. So let's see if that's changed, if some people have been really thinking about what their purpose is. I think everyone is. Yeah, everyone seems to have done it. And we've actually got not very well defined now. So the dial seems to have moved. I hope that's because you've got clarity over what a purpose should be and maybe thinking about what your brand or your company should be doing. So thank you so much, Minter and Jackie, for your time today and for sharing your thoughts on the topic. I just wanted to quickly share my screen. You should be able to see some previous events that we have had. If you're still interested in finding a bit more about purpose, and especially in relation to branding, we've got some previous events that we've run on this, and you can find them on our website as well as all upcoming events. And just a reminder that you do get 25% off Minter and Jackie's books, and the discount code will be put in the chat for you as well. So thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you again, Jackie and Minter. That was a brilliant talk.
Thanks for having us. It was great.
Thank you. And I hope you all have a wonderful day, whether that's evening or morning. I think Jackie's just had to wake up at the crack of dawn for us. So thank you. And we'll see you all next time. Bye.